I just learned something new that maybe someone else will find interesting. Um, I got both of these saws tore apart for a different reason, which I'll make a separate video about the carburetor setup and what have you later. But this specifically is, I guess, about the air filter setup and what have you. I watched another video where a guy briefly showed this, but figured I kind of do this a little more in depth. So this is a OEM Stihl 440, and this one here is a Farmer Tech 460. Even though it's got the Stihl logo on top of it, and I got like the OEM Stihl Elasto Start. This one does have, it's got some OEM parts on it, but the fuel tank assembly and what have you is Farmer Tech. And So I personally am not terribly a fan of the air filter setup on the 440. I actually prefer the air filter setup on the 460. Now they both take the same filter element itself. I personally am using max flow filters, and the filter element will swap over between the 460 and the 440, no worries. But what I'm talking about is, I don't know what Stihl necessarily calls this, but let's call this the filter base. So the the 460 uses this setup here, and the 440 has got this entire plastic piece here. The stud that the 440 air filter screws to is like so, and the 460 is like so. And like I said, personally, I'm just kind of more a fan of this setup here. And I guess here's the max flow cover for the 460. And this one for the 440. Both max flow covers, but you can see the 461 is a larger cover and is shaped differently and whatnot. I find with the max flow setup that the 440 cover kind of compresses the bottom of the filter. So this is the one that came off my 440. And you can see it's kind of compressed on the bottom. It's not the end of the world, but I just would prefer that it didn't. And then here's the one for the 460. Still compresses it, obviously, but it's just, I feel like, not as bad, and I feel like it fits a little better. So yeah, you can kind of see a section in the center there that's all pushed down and squished in versus this one over here. But because these saws are so similar, as it turns out, I can actually take the parts off the 440 here and swap them with the 460. And so then I can put the 460, baffle or whatever you want to call it on there, and then the rest of the 460 parts will go on like so. However, it does not work the other way around, because come to find out, as it turns out, the fuel tank is slightly larger on the 460. Now granted, like I said, this is a Farmer Tech 460 fuel tank, but they typically like 100% copy the design and the size profile of the OEM parts. Stihl parts are much better quality, but like this here is a OEM fuel tank vent and a Farmer Tech fuel tank, and an OEM fuel cap and a Farmer Tech fuel tank. Like, parts are interchangeable, but when I go to put this guy on here, this lower portion of the 440 air filter base does not fit over here. And it just, you can't push it on far enough. Whereas the stock 460 setup just simply goes around that entirely. And if we look at this here and I guess line this up, say with the side of the case here or the position of this corner here, you can see that this fuel tank vent is left of that corner and the fuel filler cap is left of the split between the crankcase and the starter. If we look over here, the fuel tank vent is much more lined up with the corner and the filler cap is essentially in line with that split between the starter and the crankcase. Like so. And it's not that damn much of a difference, but it is a difference. And so yeah, there you go. As it turns out, you can put 460 air filter and such on a 440, but not necessarily the other way around unless you were to trim out the bottom section here, which I would imagine would work just fine if you were to trim that out, if you were so inclined, if you like the 440 setup better. I actually never noticed this myself, and I haven't gone and looked up part numbers and shit for the fuel tank assembly, but I would assume that the fuel tank assembly is 1 or 2 part numbers off because of this. And if we look up here, I think, I don't know for sure, but I think this here is a clip for the winter air filter. They have, you can get, well, I don't think you can get for the 460, but I think for the 440, looking at the parts diagram, there was a what the fuck am I trying to say? A large fleece type air filter that could go on here, similar to how the air filter setup is on the 361, where with how I've got it set up right now, it uses the HD2 style air filter, which, the MaxFlow is compatible with. But either way, both of these have those little clips on top of there. So yeah, thought it was interesting. Maybe someone else will too.